All right, I'm here with WatchYourSixx, two X's. He told me make sure to say it's two X's. Let me just ask the first question. Your DPS calculator, where in the world did that come from?
So a little over a year ago, I started playing on a private server called Retro WoW, and they have these vendors where you could just go and buy whatever you want, pretty much. And so I wanted to play Hunter for PvP, and I was like, what gear do I need? What gear should I get? And so I looked around, tried to find some BIS lists and different guides and stuff, and I didn't really see anything that really stood out on why you should take this piece over this piece. And I had played on another private server, Northdale, where I used Feral Cat Simulator, one of the druids in the Druid Discord made, and it was really good. I really enjoyed that. So I was like, you know what? I'll just make a hunter simulator, and so I pretty much copied his design and then made a simple hunter calculator to see like how much AP I get, how much crit I get, and then it kind of turned into this huge project.
How many years ago was that, give or take?
I don't know, 13 months ago. It was the beginning of last February.
Okay, so it hasn't been that very long, considering the length and time in which private servers were around.
Yeah, no, I started playing private servers maybe 2 years ago, and then played, well, a little less than 2 years ago, because I played from the beginning of Northdale's launch, and played Feral all through that up until I started making this sheet, and I got tired of playing Feral. So I started making this. I was playing Retro WoW with my friend, and
Okay.
started making hunters on Northdale.
I got you. You know, I won't lie. I've never even remotely dabbled with the private server scene. Not because of any like morality issue where people used to argue like, "Oh, it's illegal," blah blah blah. I could have cared less. But the simple fact of the matter was that I was 10 years removed from the Navy, and I was in college for 4 years. I just met my wife right around the time that other private servers started to take off. Northdale was one of them. And I just decided that, I was just going to hold out hope that they were going to forgive this classic. And it was actually right around that time that they had announced it at BlizzCon.
4 months after I had started playing. Because I
Was
started playing private servers because I was like, man, I missed WoW so much. I quit after Mist of Pandaria, and I was like, I miss WoW so much. I haven't played it in 10 years or so. And I was like, I'm starting to lose hope that they would ever come out with either classic or some other remake of it. So I was like, you know what? We'll just play a private server. It's not that big a deal. Because I originally was also under the impression that it was a big deal. Like that wasn't something you could just do. And then I started doing some research. I was like, oh, okay. As long as you don't run one, it's okay.
yeah, exactly. You can't get in trouble as long as you're not the one who's actually making money from it. So the other question I wanted to ask is like, what? I mean, I think you've already touched on this a little bit, but can you expand just a little bit more? What was the foundational work like when you started building this? You mentioned that you do a little bit here, a little bit there. How were you testing things? How much effort were you having to put into testing things and simulating things in order to make sure these numbers are actually sound and legit?
So, since I was basing it off of the Feral DPS simulator created by Shido the Druid, I had a really good foundation to work with, and like he had already set up like how to get the average DPS and how he was doing all of his attack power equivalencies and like stat weights and stuff like that. So I pretty much just copied that and added what was Hunter and took away what wasn't Hunter. And then as far as like testing and stuff, I got my own copy of the Lights Hope repack, and was able to do a bunch of testing on it, and also did a bunch of testing on Retro WoW. So I'd pretty much just sit there and test for hours on end, doing rotations and different gear setups and stuff like that, and then see if it matches my sim. And if it doesn't match my sim, I'd try and adjust the sim to see, okay, why does it not match? And most of the time, it generally came down to crit luck, because this game's very RNG based, especially for hunters, because we don't attack as often. So we need a lot longer fights for that variance to come down. So it was just really a learning experience. Just constantly, I probably spent 7 days / played on that test server, just constantly testing stuff. And I put a lot of time in on Retro WoW, just playing around with different gear sets and PvPing, stuff like that.
What was the first hurdle or early hurdles in general that you needed to overcome in the early days? And even like still to this day, what are some hurdles you have come up on occasion?
Probably the biggest hurdle, I wouldn't say it was the first hurdle. It might have been the first hurdle, but it was the biggest hurdle, and I didn't really fully get over it until like a month ago. And that was creating an accurate haste calculation. With the Feral sheet, they have he took a bunch of hits that he did, and like took a bunch of different parses that he had, and then he said, okay, I did 90 hits on this one, I did 80 hits on this one, but the duration on the 90 hit one was 180 seconds, and duration was 170 seconds on the second one. And he kind of had this average hits per second based on actual parses. And so I kind of did that too. But then I had to create, I had to come up with some kind of number to represent your actual weapon speed, because for some reason, when you did your rotation, you weren't actually getting 2.78 attack, or you weren't getting an attack every 2.78 seconds with a 3.2 speed weapon or whatever. You'd actually get like one attack every 3.2 seconds. So it took me forever to really get that to be accurate. I did have it accurate to my tests, but at the same time it was, sometimes off, like maybe off by 1 or 2 hits, and 1 or 2 hits could be the difference between something being 5 DPS or 30 DPS more. So that you kind of saw that, like if you had one of the older versions of the sheet, the Ashjarethul would only be like 5 to 10 DPS over Rockdalar. But now that my haste calculations are much more accurate and properly reflect what you would have or how many hits you would have, it's actually like 40 to 50 DPS more. And that's average DPS, not real DPS. Everything on the sheet works off of average DPS. I do have a plan to eventually add a way to see like your variance, or like a confidence interval, basically. So if you're looking at your DPS for a 30-second fight, you might have 100% crit, or you might have 0% crit. And so that kind of changes that range that you would have. Your average might be 600 DPS, but you go into a raid and you parse 400 DPS, and you're like, why is my DPS so much lower than the average DPS that the sheet shows? And so you can kind of see you were actually 400 DPS because of your crit, not because of something that you didn't do. So that's something that I want to add in the future. It's been kind of hard to come up with, and I'm trying to avoid doing a iterative calculation, because that complicates the sheet and makes it harder for the general user to use.
You know, Rock Dalar versus Ash Thul, and when you when you said it'd be only 10 or 12 or 20 more DPS, I really cringed for a minute. I was like, "There's no way. That's way too low." Surely you must have immediately, like, your brain probably went to the same direction.
When I was looking at it, I was like, well, it kind of matches my tests, so I kind of agree with the sim. But at the same time, you know, like the tests themselves have crit variance, and I wasn't really looking too much at that because I tried to do, you know, 10-minute tests or 20-minute tests or whatever, to try and reduce that variance. But, you know, there's still going to be that variance. So I did kind of question it, but at the same time, it was like kind of closely matches how many hits you would have. Even before I changed it, I was talking with one of the hunters in the hunter Discord, and he was saying that if you add the delay that AimShot currently has, and you don't take that delay away for Astrethal, then the actual number of autos you get off is actually really similar to what my simulator had before I fixed the haste. And so then fixing the haste actually made that delay even more important to remove, because it just shows the difference of what you're losing if you had that delay.
Okay.
And I think showing that delay was kind of unintentional, like in the sim, because I wasn't actually incorporating that delay. But at the same time, I kind of was, because I just assumed that there was a flat 0.5 seconds added to every auto for the sim, and the only reason I went with 0.5 was because I was trying to match the number of hits to actual parses, and I kind of found a sweet spot with that 0.5. But again, all of this was done on private servers, so like all those hit tests and everything was done on private servers. All that, whatever delay that could have been introduced on private servers is why that might have been inaccurate.
Yeah, I can imagine that the transition from private server database to a, the actual classic WoW database is somewhat indicative of just natural changes that you needed to account for. Was there any kind of evolution over time as you transitioned from the private server testing to classic WoW itself?
Nothing really specific. Uh, Pretty much the haste calcs were unfinished on the private server side, and really like there's just a lot that I was working through, and I'll do this, and then I want to do that, and then I kind of put the haste effects on back burner, and then I do something else and put something else on back burner. But one of the things that I did change recently was that all of your attacks are on a 2-roll system instead of a 1-roll system, which basically just means that if you're not hit capped, you lose crit chance because you're not hit capped. Because your hit is rolled before your crit. So if you only have a 90% chance to hit, then you only have X% crit of that 90%. And that kind of changed when I added that to my sheet. It changed the weight of hit by a lot. So hit went from only like 70% of one crit, so pretty much crit was always worth more than a hit. But now hit is like 5 to 6 AP more than crit, and so it just shows the importance of being hit capped, because if you're not hit capped, then you're actually losing crit chance. And that's
Okay.
one thing that changed with classic. Other than that, it was mostly just evolving over time. If you ever take a look at my change log on the sheet, you can see how much stuff that I've done to it. Some of it's minor, some of it's major, and This is just a lot that I've done over the last year. I've put a lot of time into this.
Yeah, Yeah, it definitely shows, man. And let me just preface this by saying that we in the hunter community, whether we're content creators, veterans, people who've cleared an axe way back in vanilla 15 years ago, or people who are just starting out right now, that have never played WoW before, and Classic got so much hype that they've just now started playing and they're just being introduced. We all appreciate the work you're putting in, continuously putting in, because this is not a this is not a one-time thing. I mean, you're continuously making changes to this. I think most recently the changes you've added to it include stuff from phase 3, and eventually, now that we know that phase 4 is coming out in April, I'm sure you're gonna have a lot of work on your hands there as well.
Not really. Most of it's already kind of the groundwork is already there. Actually, all of the gear and everything is already there. The buffs are there. Really, the only thing that I would have to adjust is I need to adjust my trinket swapping calculation, because right now I only have Devil Sore Eye pretty much incorporated, because that's the only trinket you can swap right now. But with ZG coming, that means there's 2 more trinkets that you can swap in and out. So if you have a fight that's 3 or 4 minutes long, is it worth swapping in multiple trinkets every 30 seconds or whatever? That's something I gotta go through the calculations and figure out. And because right now, if you put something in the swap trinket slot, it only works if it's a static trinket. But other than that, once I get that done with ZG, before ZG or around ZG timing, I'll be pretty much done with the sheet as far as major changes. At least I think I will. And I might even go to version 1.0. I've been kind of lingering at 9 for a while, 0.9 for a while. There's not really any method to the numbering. It's just a pick a number and go up.
That's actually pretty awesome. I was not aware that we were so close to being basically ready for ZG launch. That's impressive, dude.
Yeah.
So here's just something for the folks at home that haven't got any experience with it. How can they find it? How can they make it work? And how can they use it to their advantage?
Well, if you want, you can link it in the description. But also it's linked in the Hunter Discord. But if you just go to the link for the sim sheet, then all you gotta do is on the intro page, there's a thing that says copy link here, and you just click that. Or you can go to file, make a copy. And then once you have your own copy, you can go to the various pages and see, like for each individual slot, it'll show where an item's from, how much stats it has, and then it'll give a equivalence of AP in the far right, and that just kind of shows how good an item is over another. It doesn't show stat weight. Doesn't show set bonuses. So when you're looking at the list of individual slots, you got to keep that in mind. But then you can go to the stats and DPS page, and pretty much anything with drop down menu, you can edit that. And if you ever mess up the sheet and like click the wrong thing and it's got a bunch of errors on it, you just delete that one, go get a new copy. I've done that a few times.
The link, I would assume, is organic, and every time you perform an update, the link would change along with that.
The link actually stays the same. I mean, technically, if I do an update and it's really minor and you don't know about it, then like the link will still be updated with the changes. So if you go to that link again, you'll have the updates. But if you made a copy, you'd have to make a new copy. That's just the way Google Sheets is. I chose Google Sheets because not everybody has Excel. Everybody has access to Google Sheets.
As a hunter community, is there a way that we could possibly use it to predict future phases, what gear we want to chase after, whether we want to utilize a mixture of PvP gear with PvE gear, or is it a situation where we can say, our guild is loot council based, and I want to, as a hunter class leader in my guild specifically, I want to set my hunters up for success in the future and let loot council know, hey, these particular items are all we are going to want during phase 5 for AQ or phase 6 for Nax. Is there ways to predict what gear is best for us by using this sheet? Is that gear ready and available for us?
Yeah, if you go to on the stats DPS page, there's a content phase drop down. You can change that to phase 5, phase 6, whatever you want. And all the gear and everything's already there. Any buffs that come with that content, any enchants, that all that gets updated in each individual list. If you had it set to phase 3 right now and you went to leg enchant, 8 agility is the highest it goes. But if you set it to phase 4, you'll be able to see the Falcon's Call enchant. For phase 5, AQ brings plus 15 agility to gloves and plus 25 agility to two-handers. Those will be enabled whenever you set it to phase 5. And then you can see Nax gear, phase 6. So you can predict it yourself if you change the value or change the gear setup, but unfortunately there's no way to like just hit a button and it just pick your gear for you. I do want to do that eventually, but that takes a lot of programming, and I've kind of used a spreadsheet because although I'm somewhat decent at programming, I don't know anything about JavaScript, and I don't really know. I haven't really done much programming in the last 5-10 years, so I've mostly been using the sheet because I can do really quick formulas and if statements and stuff like that versus having to learn a new language. Yeah, you do have access to all the gear that's in the game. There might be some pieces that are missing that for some reason somebody might want, but I tried to include everything that a hunter would ever want.
That's awesome, and it's important too, because it's something to note is that many people, and why I will never understand this, but there are some people that still have disagreements over what piece of gear is better than another. So including all of those pieces of gear that people would argue over is very important.
Yeah, that's something I don't really understand either. But at the same time, most of this stuff should have been figured out 15 years ago or whatever. But at the same time, new ideas come, and sometimes the information from back then wasn't really clear. Like, maybe it was, and you just gotta kind of really look for it. But then again, a lot of people don't really look for it, and they go, well, this piece looks really good, but is it actually? And then they go and try and find somewhere that tells them that. Usually it's them asking people, hey, is this good? And they're like, no, that's terrible. Why would you get that? Or you got people that are like, yeah, it looks kind of good. So you get kind of mixed opinions without anyone ever doing the actual math behind it. It just kind of creates confusion between, any community really. So then you got loot councils that some of them know that this item is really good for a hunter or a rogue, and then some of them don't. And so they give that item to a hunter instead of a rogue, or vice versa.
Or perhaps one has a greater impact on one class as opposed to another. Like I know, for example, that a lot of people would say DFT only adds 8 attack power to a hunter's rotation, and while on the surface that's very true, if you dig a little deeper you realize that a hunter in full tier 1 can actually swap out plus 3% scope for a plus 7 damage scope on Astrothul, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that can increase your DPS pretty substantially.
Yeah, but then you get into the whole rabbit hole of if you ever compare like rogue or warrior to a hunter, you're obviously gonna get more gain by adding it to the warrior or rogue than you would a hunter. So to me that kind of comes down to, is the raider worth the item? Or if the raiders are kind of equivalent to each other, then which one will get more DPS benefit from it? And
Exactly.
That's kind of like a no-brainer that it would go to rogue, and then I mean even a warrior to an extent, because as soon as ZG comes out, hunters are going to be trinket swapping like crazy, and then it gets even worse with AQ and even worse with Nax. So having DFT as a trinket that you swap to is a whole lot different than having it as a trinket you never swap. I don't know. To me, like, I don't really see, like, DFT is a good example of something that should never go to a hunter, just because they'll stop utilizing it in later phases, versus a rogue will use it for the rest of the game.
It's also important to note as well that that particular strategy that you can perform by utilizing DFT early as a hunter you'll be able to turn right back around and do it no matter what in ZG, because Falcon's Cult is going to give you 2% additional hit anyway.
Right. Yeah, and hunters really kind of get showered with hit, especially in later gear, to the point where in Nax you don't even need the hit scope to be hit capped, and then you also got 3% that you can get in talents if you wanted to go for a PvP build or a deep survival build if you have True Shot Aura provided. There's a few options for hit that, especially with ZG, there's not really any reason that you would hit from something else.
With the DPS calculator that's available, I will provide a link in the description below. Be sure to check it out, copy it, utilize it to your advantage, hunters. It is the best tool you're going to find for calculating where you stand currently, and you can also use it, and this is particularly what I have my hunters use it for, is using it to gauge what piece of gear will be your biggest upgrade, and then you can try and make a case for yourself to say, hey, this is where I need help, this is where my DPS can improve the biggest, and utilize that to your advantage to make your loot council aware of what is actually useful to us hunters. Six, I really do appreciate you answering these questions. If you've got any comments regarding the announcement for Zul'Gurub's release in April, whether it's our main hand, offhand, best in slots, trinkets, I think you've already touched on those a little bit, the pets that are be available, Falcon's Call, which we've already mentioned, the new world buff that we'll have access to, just anything you have just off the top of your head that you think will be important to stress moving forward into Phase 4.
Nothing really specific. I do want to mention that there's this misnomer about wind serpents that getting rank 6 lightning breath suddenly makes their DPS better by a lot. And if you look at the ranks of breath, it only goes up by like 20 damage. So you gain like 4 DPS on average or whatever. It's really insignificant, but for whatever reason, there's been this consensus on private servers that serpents were the best pet after ZG. And I even saw that a little bit in Classic. And I'm like, well, for one, bosses have higher nature resistance than what we expected. And then for two, going up a rank in breath isn't significant at all. And then the ZG bats, they're really good for PvP because they have that 1.0 attack speed. And nothing's more annoying than having a bat flapping its wings and screeching at you constantly in PvP. So I kind of look forward to that. So yeah, I think there's not much in ZG that you really get as upgrades. You do get a main hand and an offhand, and then the world buff is really nice. It's one of the better world buffs. And then the enchants, the trinkets, and then ZG rings are going to be your best rings until AQ. So you want to try and get those as quickly as possible, because they replace, if you have accurate right now, they replace that, and they replace Don Julio's band. Like any combination of rings you have right now, or you will have before ZG, will be replaced with the ZG rings, because they're just so good.
You're referring to the Seal of Jin and the Band of Jin.
Yes. Yeah, they have a set bonus that's like plus 50 AP, and then they also have just really good stats individually. So there's nothing that comes even close.
I know that on your Discord as well as my own, the fact that many people want to either argue with the notion or the idea that things are not the way they used to be in their mind. And the soft crit cap myth. A lot of people want to just jump up in arms when you say that soft crit is not really a thing, that it's more or less you want to find a healthy balance of both attack power and crit. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
I used to have a spreadsheet that kind of broke it down, but then I ended up just sharing the graphs as that's all people really needed to see from it. But basically, someone made a hunter guide not too long ago. I guess it was about 4 or 5 years ago for the private server scene, and that graph showed that it was crit versus percent DPS, and it shows that as you gain more crit, your percent DPS goes down. If it goes past 25%, you lose, or it's no longer 1% of your DPS. And while that's true, they failed to mention that that same graph, but use AP instead, you'll get that same decrease. And that's just because the more DPS that you do, the less percent it's going to be as you go up. So if you add 1% crit and you do 1,000 damage, now you're going to do 1,010 damage. Well, that's only 1% of your DPS. If you add another crit and it goes up by 10 damage, well, that's 0.99%. You see what I mean? So each point of AP or crit, it's going to increase your damage by 10 or by 0.5 or whatever. It's each point that you add is going to add the same amount. But what most people fail to realize is that they look at it as percent DPS and they go, oh, well, AP is going to be better after you get to this certain point. One of the common mistakes with that is if you have more AP, your crits are going to be harder. So every time you crit, you're going to hit for more. If you have more AP, and let's say you have 50% crit and you add 100 AP, then you're going to do more damage than if you were to add an extra 2% crit.
The linear relationship between crit and ranged attack power, there is no point to where one overtakes the other, is essentially what you're getting at. Is because the more ranged attack power you have, obviously when you crit, your damage is gonna be much higher than if you had less crit. And if you have more crit, but you sacrifice attack power, then your crits aren't going to be as impactful. So you have to find a healthy relationship of the two.
And to kind of go on that, you're naturally going to get a lot of AP and a lot of crit from gear. So generally speaking, there's never going to be a choice between, oh, should I get 5% crit or 100 AP? It's always going to be 30 AP or 1% crit. And if you use the stat weights in my sheet, you can see, well, obviously the 30 AP is going to be less than 1% crit on average. And that's just the way the stat weights are set up, is to show if you were to add 1% crit, how much damage do you gain? If you were to add 1% or 1 AP, how much damage would you gain? And then I can kind of compare that really easily. And so I wouldn't ever say that, you should focus on one or the other. It's just kind of whichever one gives you more equivalent AP is going to be the one that you want.
So again, just the fact that this tool is available to everybody to access and use this. And the stat weights, correct me if I'm wrong, but do the stat weights, they change depending on the gear you're wearing, correct?
Right. It changes with the gear you're wearing, changes with debuffs that you have selected, it changes with pretty much everything on that sheet. If you change your talents, they'll change. But in most cases, it's not going to change significantly, except for doing world buffed versus not world buffed. And the reason for that is if you have no world buffs, then getting more crit is going to be worth a lot more. But if you have world buffs, that's 10% more crit than you had before. So your crit weight's going to be a little bit less. But other than that, it's going to change by less than 1 AP for each one per individual change. Now, when you change like an entire gear set, it might go up by 2 AP or 3 AP. It's just the way I designed it is that it's as you change your gear, the setup and everything, it will change with it. Like for example, phase 3, you have 1% crit equals 32 AP or 33 AP or whatever. Yes, it's true that that's, if you rounded it, that's what it is. But at the same time, if you're world buffed, it might be a little less, or if you're not world buffed, it might be a little more. It all just kind of depends. And so that's why I usually just encourage people, like, if they're trying to figure out, is this item better than this item? Well, instead of just wondering, you can go to my sheet and do it.
The conversation that is had between, people in the classic community, regardless if it's the hunters, the rogues, the warriors, the druids, shamans, whatever, it's impressive that the amount of passion there is for this game, this community. There are people that literally never even touched an MMO until they discovered World of Warcraft 15 years ago, and it just changed their lives. And here we are re-experiencing that. I just want to know if there's anything for you personally that you feel like you want to just capture the magic, because we're never getting this feeling back, right? Like, we're never going to have a 15-year gap between World of Warcraft Vanilla and World of Warcraft Classic, even if they recycle Classic, or they give us Classic Plus, or they give us, a TBC Legacy server. What is the most important thing that you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm never getting this back, I want to make sure I soak this up as best I can?
I don't know. For me, like, it's just been something that I've just thoroughly enjoyed it. Even the private server scene, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and there's a lot of nostalgia, especially going back through the very first time that I started on a private server. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so nostalgic. And then doing that same thing on Classic, and just hearing that music and the starting zones, and just taking everything in, it was an experience that you really don't get if you're used to it. And so it's kind of, I don't know, I'm gonna miss it for sure. I already do kind of miss it. So sometimes I'll go and create a new character and kind of experience that again, but then it kind of fades real quick because I've been playing a lot in the last 6 months, or even the last couple of years. But I don't know, that there's definitely something that you kind of want to, like, I think to a degree everyone wants to soak in about their own experience. But definitely for me, it's been just nostalgia. As far as like doing all this hunter sim stuff and doing all these tests and stuff, that's just what I enjoy to do. So it doesn't matter what game I'm playing, I'll be doing that. And so Classic's no different. If they come out with TVC, it's gonna be no different. Hopefully somebody will have made something for that, so that I don't have to, but I'm probably gonna have to.
Okay, so the only other thing that I know that a lot of people in the community are completely oblivious to, and if they're not, they don't understand it. I myself, I admit, I don't entirely understand it. I know that you have it posted within the frequently asked questions section of your Discord, and that is the aim shot delay followed by, or excuse me, the delay for the auto shot following an aim shot cast. I know there's a macro to fix it. Can you just kind of explain in layman's terms, why is that occurring, what's causing it, and how can we fix it?
So basically, this is one of those hashtag no change things. From what I was told in beta, and what Blizzard told us just before launch is that basically hunters have a retry timer. So if you have auto shot toggled on and for whatever reason auto shot fails to start casting auto shot because it has a 0.5 second cast time, it will retry in half a second. So if you let's say you're kiting something and you continue to move and you don't stop before it's ready to shoot, then it'll do that retry timer. And then if you were to stop after it started that retry timer, then you would have to wait up to half a second before you can even start casting auto shot. So it can take up to a whole second for your auto to even go off. So what's happening is with aim shot, well, your auto shot is already toggled on when you go to aim shot, doing your natural rotation. And for whatever reason, it tries to shoot auto shot while aim shot is casting. So depending on the timer, how much haste you have, and the weapon speed of your weapon will determine like how long of a delay that it'll have and when it tries to retry or to play that half second delay. So it actually goes off multiple times while you're casting aimed, but you only notice it after it casts aimed, and then you gotta wait for your auto to go off. So basically the macro that I made, the whole idea behind it is just to turn auto shot off, because it's not going to do the retry timer if your auto shot is on or off. And the reason why I did clear target and target retarget or retarget last target is because I wanted to make it somewhat spammable during the cast. Like if you accidentally hit it twice, it's not going to turn auto shot back on. And then doing it on the aim shot macro itself makes it to where you don't have to have another bind, or you don't have to change your auto shot macro if you were to have the exclamation mark cast auto shot or whatever. Because if you had that, then you'd have to change it to just auto shot and then toggle it on and off. You wouldn't be able to spam that either. So it was just kind of a compromise. Basically the whole point of it is just to turn your auto shot off. So if you press it when your aim shot is on cooldown, it's going to turn your auto shot off. So you got to avoid doing that.
So I see that there's been a recent change to the aim shot macro on the Discord, and you have the /cast exclamation point auto shot followed by cast aim shot. Is there a reason that change was made?
It was something I tried out and I kind of liked. So basically, if you accidentally turn it off by pressing it while it's on cooldown, and you use that macro instead, whenever it's ready to shoot aim shot, it'll make sure that it shoots an auto shot first, as long as you don't spam it. Like if you spam it really fast, it's not gonna work. But if you just press it once or twice, then it should cast an auto shot first, and then aim shot will be queued immediately after it starts to cast auto shot, and then aim shot will go off. It'll still clear target and turn auto shot off. So if you press it while it's on cooldown, it'll still turn it off, but it kind of alleviates the issue where if you're just about to cast an auto and you turn it off, then you kind of panic because you're like, oh crap, started auto shot or started aim shot and I didn't even get an auto because I turned it off. So you can kind of use this to make sure if you're trying to aim shot, you'll get an auto shot off first, as long as the auto shot's ready to shoot, at least.
I will say this: there are some people in my Discord that did not like the way this was laid out because they like to be able to open up aim shot, and I tried to explain to him. I said, look man, if you just want to aim shot, just cycle it twice, on the same global, and you'll be fine. You'll aim shot first every time. Would it matter if the aim shot were first, and the auto shot cast were second in that line.
Yeah, if the auto shot is second, then it kind of goes back to the whole. It'll keep your auto shot turned on. I think. Actually, I've never tried that. Because I feel like it should still drop your target and turn it off, but casting aim shot, I don't know, it'd kind of not really do anything as far as auto shot's concerned. Like if aimed is on cooldown and you press it, it's not gonna shoot auto shot, because as soon as it starts to auto shot, it'll toggle off your target, and it does that kind of in the same batch, so there's no delay between it, so it's not gonna go, oh, well, I need to auto shoot and then clear target. It's just gonna clear target. With aim shot, though, with having it cast auto shot and then cast aim shot, it's two different cast commands, so for whatever reason it has a little bit of a delay so that you can queue aim shot. But what I do personally is I have aim shot on my back bar, and that's just aim shot, no macro, just aim shot. And then that way I can do a precasted aim, and then I swap to my front bar, and then I have that one has the macro. That's the one I stay on most of the time. But if I'm ever like starting a pull or the tank's going in for a pull, then I'll start with that and then swap to the other bar. That's just what I personally do. Like, I mean, you could also make a shift modifier to where you cast aim shot first if you have shift held down or control held down or whatever. There's different ways to do it. But that's just what I came up with. And then you can also just leave it out. I mean, you don't have to have that cast auto shot at the start. That was just something that I did for myself, and a couple of people were asking about it, so I decided to include it.
Six, man, I appreciate you taking your time out of your day. I know you're busy with not just the real life things, but also doing this spreadsheet and everything else, and I'm sure the Discord's keeping you hopping. So thank you so much for taking time to just sit down with me and talk about it. And I'm going to share this with the folks on the tubes, and I hope they appreciate all the work you put into it. I know I certainly do. If there's anything else, last minute thoughts you just want to share with the community, just the floor is yours. Oh, you have an open mic.
Well, the only thing I can really think of that I want to share with is I've been working really hard lately on a melee weaving deep dive / guide. I don't want to say too much about it, but I'm hoping that I cover everything and anything and everything related to melee weaving, and hopefully leave no doubts on whether weaving is worth it. For those that don't know, melee weaving is adding a raptor strike into your normal rotation during one of your auto shots that you don't do anything else. But is it really that simple though? Be on the lookout.
Awesome. It's absolutely going to be incredible to see. I cannot wait for that myself. I've got people on my channel, my Discord, that are continuously asking me about melee weaving, so I'll be really looking forward to that tool. Thank you so much, Six. I really do appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And as always, be sure to like, subscribe, all other good stuff. Link down below for the descriptions for both the DPS calculator, both the Hunter Classic Discord run by WatchYourSixx, and also our community Discord for the True Shot Brigade. As always, guys, love you guys. We'll see you in the next video. Zera out.